What is the strangest unsolved mystery? Asha degree. Lived in my town. In 2000, she walked out of her home willingly at age 9 in the middle of the night on Valentine's Day during a massive storm. She was sighted multiple times walking down an extremely rural and desolate highway by herself in the pouring rain and then was never seen again. Her book bag was discovered miles away, buried in a trash bag a year later. How was a 9-year-old convinced to leave her home alone in the middle of the night, in a storm, to walk down a deserted highway? How has there been no substantive leads at all since 2001? The 169th victim of the Oklahoma City bombing. They found an additional leg in the rubble. DNA tests showed it belonged to another victim who had already been buried but with the wrong leg. The wrong leg had already been embalmed, so they could not DNA at the time. So who did this leg belong to? All other legs have been accounted for in other victims. They found no other body parts, and nobody else had been reported missing. It was only until 2015 they could get DNA from the leg, but it's still classified as a John Doe. A few conspiracy theories have popped up, like maybe a second bomber that got caught in the blast, but it's still unknown. The murders of billionaires Barry and Honey Sherman, found dead in their mansion in Toronto by their realtor. They were found with their necks tied, fully clothed on their pool deck with no signs of a break-in. Well-known philanthropists. Barry was in the pharmaceutical industry, and they donated millions annually to multiple charities. The police originally believed it was a murder-suicide and didn't pursue other leads. The family launched a private investigation that found the evidence didn't support that theory and thus proved police incompetence. As the public became more interested, it was discovered there was a whole family dispute over inherited shares at the Apotex company. The Shermans' nieces and nephews had launched lawsuits over their right to inherit shares, which they lost and most accepted. The Shermans' children hired private investigators because of the inept Toronto police. It uncovered an unknown man leaving the property around the time of the murders. The case is fascinating and is the subject of multiple podcasts, a book, and movie. I remember seeing a video about a woman that after getting divorced started getting stalked and assaulted in her own home. Every time police would arrive, no one more than her was at the scene. Sometimes she would appear with bruises. Once she appeared with a screwdriver through her hand. This happened so many times that police started ignoring her calls after the investigation on her husband and on the case left no suspects. 3 months later, she disappeared just to reappear next to a highway in the middle of a desert, miles away from her house, with her hands tied, dead. The autopsy later confirmed she was beaten to death. Creepy as shit, I know. On December 4th, 1872, a British-American ship called the Mary Celeste was found empty and drifting in the Atlantic. It was found to be seaworthy and with its cargo intact, except for a lifeboat, which it appeared had been boarded in an orderly fashion. No one knows what happened to the crew or why they left the ship. I don't know if this has been posted already or not. 1986, missing boy of Somo, Sierra. Juan Pedro Martinez. Kid's father is a truck driver. He is tasked with taking a semi carrying a tank of sulfuric acid from Cartagena to Bilbao and brings his wife and son to make it a little family trip. When they pass through the Somo Sierra mountain pass, the truck is reported as driving erratically, and then it crashes. The cabin is destroyed. Both parents are killed in the crash, but the kid apparently just fucking vanishes off the face of the earth. The obvious explanation is he somehow survived the crash and wandered off, but the area was thoroughly searched and no trace of him was found. Some have theorized that the sulfuric acid dissolved his body. This wouldn't work either because it would take longer than that to dissolve a body and because it would have left traces. To me, the disappearance of an extra from Scarface. Tammy Lynn Lepert went missing after a few days of shooting a scene for the film. I think she was the girl Manny flirts with before he shoots up the motel to save Tony. But apparently, she was behaving really erratically at home. She left her mother's house on the morning of July 6th, 83, likely to keep shooting, and was never seen again. She was 18 when she disappeared. The one with the bridge in Scotland and ton of dogs had jumped off it for no reason. Scientists claim it has something to do with a high-pitched noise. Others claim that it has to do with scent, ghosts, alternative universe, and evil energy. Houston, Texas Lover's Lane murders. During the summer of 1990, 22-year-old Cheryl Henry met 21-year-old Andy Atkinson through friends at Yucatan Liquor. Andy was gone for the summer from Stephen F. Austin State University, and the two started dating. On August 22, 1990, the two, who had been dating now for around 2 weeks, had planned a double date with Cheryl's younger sister, Shane. Each couple went their separate ways to continue the night. Shane said she kissed her sister goodnight and told her, "I love you," around 11:30 p.m. It was what they always did. But when Shane woke up in the morning, Cheryl still wasn't home. And over at Andy's house, he also hadn't returned home. Both families contacted the police. A search was conducted for the couple and for the car they were in, Andy's white Honda Civic. In the early evening of August 23rd, Houston police located Andy's car after a guard who was doing a sweep of an industrial area called it in. It was parked in an isolated cul-de-sac on Enclave Road, an area often used as a lover's lane. When police approached the car, it was clear something awful had happened. The windows were rolled down. The key was still in the ignition. The seats were laid back and a cassette was in the dash. On the floorboard of the passenger side was a woman's shoe and purse. But most chillingly, there were fresh signs of blood in the car. Just before midnight, the dogs led police to an area roughly 200 yards from Andy's car. A golf club and 3 golf balls seemed to have been purposely placed, pointing to pieces of a rotting cedar fence on the ground. Police looked under the pieces of the fence and found the body of Cheryl. She was face down. Her clothes had been cut off and tossed near her remains. Her hands were bound behind her back with hemp rope. She had been sexually assaulted and her throat was slashed with 3 gashes. Near her body was also a $20 bill. The search continued for Andy. The next morning, about 100 yards from Cheryl's body in the tree line, authorities discovered Andy's body. He was fully clothed, with his back against a tree and his hands bound, like Cheryl's. And like Cheryl, his throat had also been slashed. But the slash was so deep, he was nearly decapitated. His watch and money were still on his person, ruling out the possibility of robbery as the primary motive. After 32 years, this mystery is still unsolved. For me personally, my grandmother was murdered in her home in 1996, I think. She was beaten so badly, her own sister didn't recognize her at first. Given where she was living, it was most likely some meth head, who will never be found. But I'd be interested to know who did that to her. The lost A-bomb off the coast of America, which the US government said not to worry about in the 50s and tried to cover up, was dumped in the ocean in an aviation accident, and it's still lost to this day. 100 times more powerful than what was dropped in Japan. There was a girl in the 19th century who was murdered after a party. She went to a friend's to get dressed. Then they went to the party. It was on a particular holiday I don't remember. She met a man named Thornton after the party and left with him. She was found the next day in a park. She had been raped and strangled. Thornton was put on trial but acquitted due to lack of evidence, and it was never solved. The weirdest thing was that in the 1970s it happened again, but both crimes were nearly identical. It was the same holiday, the same town. The girl went to a friend's to get dressed, and they went to a party. She met a man named Thornton and left with him, and was found the next day raped and strangled in the same park, very close to where the first girl was found. Again, Thornton was put on trial but acquitted due to lack of evidence. The story is just weird. Also, both girls had the same birthday. Did the Serbian farmer, Đorđe Martinović, get injured from a bottle up his ass in a failed masturbation attempt or from an interrogation by 2 Albanian men? During May 1985, he was treated for injuries caused by the insertion of a bottle up his anus. Initially, he claimed that he was attacked by Albanians. While being interrogated, he stated that it was actually caused by him masturbating. The bizarre situation caused widespread controversy and contributed to worsening tensions between Kosovo's Serbs and Albanians. He eventually reverted back to his original story that he was attacked. Tim Malnar sends chills down my spine. Young kid from Florida, family-oriented, and in college. All the good stuff. One day, in 1984, instead of taking his usual route to school, he decides to drive 50 miles in the opposite direction. He stopped to get gas and continued on. 4 months after he had disappeared, his folks received a letter from an auto impound company in Atlanta, Georgia, which said that he had left his car in a parking lot 6 days after he initially vanished. They also discovered that he had pretty much emptied his bank account just before he left. On January 31st, 1996, a show about unsolved mysteries aired, and Tim Malnar was on it. A guy named Stephen Cole, who had seen it, called and told them that he recognized Tim's clothes as the ones he had found on a body frozen in an ice block lot in Neosho, Wisconsin 10 years earlier. Through DNA testing, the body confirmed to be Tim's. So tell me, how does this 24-year-old kid, who was incredibly close with his family, end up 1,300 miles away from his home, frozen in an ice block in bumfuck Wisconsin? Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe to the channel, press the like button, and also write in the comments what unsolved mystery you know. Bye.